You've been seeking answers from every dermatologist, doctor, and all over the internet, wondering what on earth this unbearable skin issue is. You know something's up, and you've been suffering and silenced for far too long. This podcast is going to bring awareness to the brutal reality that is topical steroid addiction and withdrawal syndrome. It will give you practical mental and physical tips to help you along your journey and provide you the strength you need to push through each day. You'll hear from real people battling this illness, as well as experts in the field, and I'm also going to share with you what's happening as I battle and conquer TSW. You are not alone, you're not crazy, and you will heal. If there's one thing I know, it's that anyone going through this hell is a warrior. My name is Jennifer Powers, and I welcome you to TSW Journey to Healing. Okay, welcome to the show. I'm very excited for this episode. I am bringing on another very special guest. This is Shai, and she is going to talk. We're going to focus a lot on this episode about mindset, the power of the mind with the body. I can't wait to dive into things and get started. But before we do, well, I want to welcome you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you. And I want to thank you so much for your patience, because so many listeners and people just all over the web have been filling out the form to apply to be a guest on the show. I noticed that yours was back in like the middle of October, and now here we are in like middle of January at the time of this recording. So thank you so much for bearing with me and letting me just schedule all these wonderful people out. And so I really appreciate your patience.
No worries. It's a good sign. It means your work is paying off and your word is getting out there. So this is great.
It's a great sign. Totally. I agree. So let's I always like to kind of start from the beginning, but your name, Shai, it's so beautiful. I'm curious what your nationality is.
So my full name is Shaista, which means polite in Persian, but I'm actually Kenyan. I was born and brought up in Kenya. If you look back at my lineage, I'm fourth generation Kenyan, but obviously my ancestors come from India. I was living in the UK for 8 years, most recently, and then a year ago I moved to Canada, so living in Toronto now. So a little bit of everything.
Wow. Okay. So, oh my gosh, I'm dying to go to Africa. I just hear like the most incredible things. So Kenya, how long were you in Kenya for?
Up until I went to university, and then after university, I was working there for about 2.5 years. So wow. I would say a good chunk of, the first half of my life was spent in Kenya, which I would highly recommend visiting.
Oh, good. Okay. There's so many amazing places to see in Africa, and Kenya was up there on my list. So that's good to know. Awesome. Mm-hmm. So let's, now that we know a little bit about your name and the history and your lineage and all that, why don't we talk about it doesn't have to be short, but what your story is in regards to the TSW journey and kind of what brought you to be, unfortunately, among us, or fortunately, because we get to know each other now, but what is your story?
Well, it starts very much like everyone else's that I've kind of heard on your podcast, but essentially was diagnosed with really minor eczema at a very young age. The earliest record I can find for myself is 2 years old. And, speaking to my mom and all the rest of it, learned that I was put on a very low dose of hydrocortisone. I think it was 1%. And that seemed to do the trick for me for the most part, because it was very minimal, like I say, in the creases of my elbows, behind my knees. And that was the most of it, really. I feel like shellfish was something that exacerbated my eczema when I was younger. But being from a family that exports seafood, I would always be eating prawns and other shellfish. And it seemed like I kind of grew out of that allergy. So it didn't cause the eczema for me past the age of maybe 9, 10. So I've been able to grow out of that allergy. Through my teenage years, I found that my eczema got worse, towards the time that I was starting to think about university, and I put that down to stress. And so again, back on the steroid cream, on and off. It was extremely sporadic. And again, it was just the 1%. And I had a very stubborn spot above my lip and on the bridge of my nose. And really, it was very manageable. It wasn't, it didn't take over my life, and it wasn't something that I really had to think much about. And the steroid cream would kind of do its thing. And I'd be fine after a few days. Thankfully, I wasn't overusing it at that time. When I look back now, I think I was using it very sparingly. So through university, had no eczema. After university, noticed it came back. And again, I think this had to do with the stresses of, finding a job as an adult and getting settled into life as an adult. But I came across this amazing cream. I don't know what it was. I guess gut instinct was telling me that, using steroids all the time probably isn't the best thing for me. Wasn't ever something I heard from a dermatologist. But I guess, yeah, gut instinct. And so I would try different things and try and go for more natural approach or for products that had less ingredients in them and found, I don't know if you've heard of Lush Cosmetics.
Yeah.
They do this dream cream, and it's basically an oat-based cream. And that kept me more or less eczema free for almost 5 years. So it worked a dream for me. And I'd highly recommend anyone trying it. But what I then found was when I went to Canada, so I decided to visit Canada in 2020. It wasn't the first time I'd visited, but it was the first time that I was doing 6 months there. Because I wanted to test it out to see what it was like. My now husband and I were thinking of moving there, and I kind of wanted to get a taste of what it would be like. Even though I'd visited in the past and been totally fine, within the first 2 weeks of being there, I had this really intense allergic reaction of some sort. And at the time, the doctors put it down to dermatitis. But essentially, what happened was I woke up one morning, my entire face was swollen and really puffy around the eyes. And I had sort of like gritty eyes and couldn't really open my eyes, and a little bit of redness around my face. And for the life of me, couldn't figure out what it was and was put on prednisone right away. And as you know, the prednisone brought it down right away. I didn't know at the time how potent prednisone was. And so I was put on it for 5 or 6 days. The swelling went away. My skin went back to normal. It was beautiful. And it started coming back about 6 or 7 days later. And so I went to the doctor again, and I was referred to a specialist. And the specialist the specialist dermatologist said to me, "Oh, you were put on too short a course of prednisone. I'm going to put you on another 10 days of it." And so, of course, I didn't know any better. And I said, "Okay, if this is going to take care of the problem, I'll do it." And so I went back on the prednisone, and my skin was beautiful after a few days and finished the 10-day course. And I think after that, my skin stayed clear for more or less 3 months or so. So this was 2020. And by the time winter came around in 2020, I started noticing a few things starting to happen. So I started noticing this redness in my cheeks. And I don't know if this is too much information, but I mean, we're all learning here. But
no, please.
I started to have this clear discharge from my nipples, and I just didn't know what it was. And of course, that freaked me out because that's not normal. And it was both nipples at the same time, which gave me a little bit of solace because I was like, okay, it's not normal for this to happen in both nipples if it's something like cancer or whatever it might be. And so had a bunch of tests done, nothing came back. And so I just prayed and hoped it would go away, and, had hope in the fact that I had done my due diligence by getting everything checked out. And 3 months later, it kind of cleared up on its own. But it was a pain to go through because anything I would wear, I'd have kind of this discharge like seeping through. And it just was quite uncomfortable and not nice to deal with. 2021 comes around and the redness in my cheeks gets worse. So I go back to a dermatologist and I get diagnosed with rosacea and put on medication for rosacea. Something, again, my gut instinct was telling me something's not right here. This is not rosacea. And by this point, I'd started reading as well, because I was like, weird things are happening to my body and this just doesn't seem normal. And went to a different doctor a month later because what I found was happening was the redness in my cheeks was then starting to turn into a rash all over my body, like a red rash. And so went to a different dermatologist who was recommended by my GP, who I trust immensely. And I read up about this dermatologist, and he was supposed to be, world renowned. And so I thought, okay, this is worth a shot. And he straight away put me on Elicon, Elidel, and Protopic, two of which are steroids, as you know, and then Protopic, of course, immunosuppressant. And not knowing any better at the time, used them. Again, I felt I was using them pretty sparingly, but at this point, I think my body was too far gone. I think the prednisone had done its damage, and I was already going through addiction, topical steroid addiction. And so, whilst the creams worked for, I would say, maybe 3 months tops, after that, I started feeling the burning, the red hot sensation in my cheeks. And yeah, I think by this point, when I'd started talking to naturopaths, I started talking to a bunch of people who I thought would be able to help me from a more natural perspective. And that's when I heard about topical steroid withdrawal.
How did you find out about the topical? Do you remember what it was that you saw?
Yes, I do. And it was actually a lady called Raki Roy, I think that's her name. And she's actually also listed on the ITSAN group of doctors or trusted practitioners. And she's a dietitian. And so actually, when I had the call with her, I told her I have severe eczema and this is what's happened to me and this is what I'm feeling. And towards the end of our call, she said to me, I feel like you might be going through topical steroid withdrawal. And at the time, I was like, wait, what? What's that? And I look back now and I can sense there was a lot of denial in me, and there was a lot of kind of resistance and pushback to what she was saying to me. And so I obviously left the call on a good note, but was convinced that that wasn't what I was going through because of how horrendous it sounded. But she had planted the seed, and that was in September 2021. And so I started reading about it, learned very quickly how TSW can take over your life. But I was prepared to actually do something about this because I wasn't going to let steroids, take over and then be something that I had to deal with in more force later in my life. And so I was getting married in November that year, which was 2 months later. And I made the decision that, okay, my skin is feeling like a mess right now. I'm a red hot mess and I need to do something for my wedding day. And I made the very, very difficult decision to go on prednisone for 4 days. So I took it, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, and then on my wedding day took 15 milligrams or whatever the dosage is. I can't really remember. And then kind of tapered off over the next 2 or 3 days. So in total, yeah, it was probably around 5, 6 days. And it meant that I was comfortable and looking beautiful on my wedding day, but I had made a very serious decision that once I'd come off the prednisone, that was it, that I was going to go cold turkey, and it was time to start my TSW journey. I think at the time I didn't realize, just how serious of a journey it was going to be.
I don't think any of us realized that.
No, we really don't. And I hadn't found the ITSAN group at that time either. So I hadn't had the chance to really read about other people's experiences from a, firsthand perspective. So I think it was a blessing in disguise because in a way it didn't scare me as much as I think it might have had I read other people's accounts of it before starting my journey. So I think our journey started pretty much exactly around the same time because I started on the 1st of December, 2021.
What?
Yeah.
We are anniversary buddies.
We are.
Oh my gosh. I technically think that is the date that I'm going with, although a few days before, or, a week or so or before that is Thanksgiving. And I don't know if there was an official days before December 1st that was off, but I'm going with the 1st. So that means we're twins.
We're twins.
Oh my gosh,
Uh,
that's crazy.
I know, it's nuts. I was listening to that episode where you shared that, and I was like, wait, what?
Wow, that's so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're now, what are we? We're like around 13-ish plus whatever months into this
Yeah.
thing. What,
Hmm.
gosh, okay, I have so many follow-up questions, but one thing I do want to say, because I know it's hard sometimes sharing all those really personal details. The fluid or the leaking of like your chest and your nipple area. The weird thing is for me, before I knew, and it might have been, I don't know if I actually mentioned this in one of the prior episodes, but I had one of my best friends had moved to London 5 or so years ago, and she came to my family as a beach house on the Jersey Shore. I'm based, in Pennsylvania, but Jersey Shore. And so she was visiting me. And at the time, I had just started I was seeing this guy. He came over to bring us these like acai bowls for breakfast. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Hmm.
They're so good.
Yeah.
And that morning, came from she came into my bedroom to be like, hey, like, he's downstairs, I think, whatever. And as I sat up in bed, my shirt was like stuck to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck is it? So I pulled my shirt. I was like, what is this? I almost, oh my God, I saw stars. Like
Mm.
luckily I didn't break the skin, but I was like, I saw the crust, like the dried crust around my nipples. And I'm like, what in the world is this? And then the left side of my neck and the back, I touched and it was wet, and it wasn't sweat, and it wasn't pus, it wasn't something with an odor really or anything. It just was wet, and it was so strange.
Hmm.
So thank you for sharing that. I always want to validate people and like thank them, because it is not easy like to share. I mean, this is like we're wide open, and this is the most raw and vulnerable I think most of us will ever be. And so
Yeah, for sure.
I know that that's really hard. So okay, so yes, we have the same timeline, but everybody's journeys are different. So what was,
Hmm.
and actually before that question, when you made the decision to go on the prednisone before your wedding, and then make that conscious decision afterwards to say, okay, cold turkey, I'm doing this. Your husband was like, what was he like for support, and was he on board with that? And what was that like?
So at the time, I think he didn't know much about TSW in the same way that I didn't know much about it. And so he didn't know what to expect in terms of, what was to come. But throughout the whole situation, and this speaks to even whilst I've been going through topical steroid, it's withdrawal itself. Honestly, Jen, I know that I am maybe one of the few, but I could not have asked for a better husband. He has been nothing but supportive in every way possible. And I mean, when it comes to taking care of me when I needed it most, in understanding when it was difficult for me to work, in calling me beautiful even when I felt my absolute worst. And I think, when it comes to people being in relationships and married couples, or even if you're not married for that matter, in terms of intimacy, I honestly, it blows my mind how compassionate he's been able to be, especially in the long periods where I just didn't feel comfortable being intimate. And so, yeah, I'm grateful for that every single day. And I think it's important that other people hear that, because it's possible. It's out there. There are people like that out there who are willing to go the full mile in terms of supporting you and being there for you no matter what you're going through. And so I think that's important to share.
I could cry hearing that. I actually recently ended my relationship, which has been just a couple weeks ago, actually, which has been really, really hard, but also just was the right decision. But I agree with you, because I saw incredible things while I was dating him, for just how selfless people can be and how much they can really step up when, to look at it from their point of view too. Like, it not only is it painful beyond belief, I'm sure, to see someone you love going through something so traumatic, but it's,
Hmm.
we're also all humans, and sometimes seeing somebody that you love, that you fell in love with, and hopefully you didn't fall in love with somebody based on their looks, but obviously the attraction piece is there for most of us, and it's important. And so that's a whole nother thing of being hard too. So I don't know who your husband is, but I love him, and I'm going to thank him for our whole community, because having that support, not all of us have it. Not everybody has that. And that's, I love that you said that it is out there. It does exist. And even if you don't have that right now, self-love, which I'm sure we'll get into with our mindset chat, but like self-love is the ultimate love and the best gift you can give for healing, which is something that I'm sure you and I both kind of have discovered in this crazy, crazy journey. So, but I'm really glad for you that you had him. That's
100%.
that's incredible.
100%. And I'm sure we'll chat more about it. But I think that, going through that journey of self-love and self-care and finding that for yourself really reflects in the person that you choose to be with, because you don't settle for less than you deserve, right? And I think that's something that's worth paying attention to as well.
100%. Could not agree with you more.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So before we get into like, what you do and the focus that you have around mental health and mindset, which I do as well, if you don't have to go in every detail, but like talk about I hate to make you bring it up, the bad memories here, but like the worst parts of this last year plus of going through this. What would you say was your like rock bottom point or the hardest point? And then where did you kind of start to take a turn? Would you say, I'm assuming that you have taken a turn because you look so beautiful and you look great.
Thank you.
But talk a little bit about the last year and what that was like.
Well, actually, just to preface, I don't find it difficult to talk about anymore. I definitely did go through a phase where it was very difficult and I'd get very emotional, but I think that I've spent a lot of time processing over the last few months, which has made all the difference for me. Um, but I think for me, it was interesting because in that first month that I'd come off the prednisone and I had started my TSW journey. And for the first month, I noticed nothing. There was no symptoms whatsoever, other than the fact that the redness in my cheeks that I had seen beforehand had come back when I was off the steroid, but there was no burning, nothing of the sort, no symptoms whatsoever. So I was confused and I was like, oh, hold on a second. I thought I was supposed to be going through some pretty horrendous symptoms right now. But it all hit me in January 2022. And at that point, I think the first symptoms that I started feeling were this really unbearable burning feeling every time I got into the shower, uh, and the red hot sensation in my cheeks. And so those are the ones that I remember most at that very beginning stage. And I went through that for about 3 months. And so that's all it was for 3 months. It was the difficulty touching water or being in the shower and this red hot sensation. And then my cycles began, the flare cycles began. And that was when I was losing sleep. It was very difficult to fall asleep. Anytime that I had skin touching skin, I was in unbearable pain because as soon as I started, sweating in any capacity, it would burn like hell. And so I would have to find all these different solutions where I was sleeping with a bamboo sheet to keep me cooler. And I was sleeping, there was absolutely no way that I was going to allow it to have skin on skin connection. And so I would have like a sheet between my legs and a sheet under my arms. And I would be sleeping in, light cotton clothing and all the rest of it. And my symptoms are quite similar to a lot of people that I've heard in that I was, suffering from insomnia. I had various food intolerances, which I didn't pick up on right away. I had the edema, the inflammation, the oozing, especially the neck area was
Oh,
horrible. It was just,
no.
honestly, it was just, I wish I had known at that time about, wrapping my neck in gauze because that was really the worst period for me. And those really difficult symptoms lasted for me from about April 2022 to August 2022. And that's when I feel like I was going through the real thick of it. And it's hard to remember now sometimes, all of the symptoms. And, this also speaks to people that are going through it now and that are going through the thick of it now, that even though it feels so horrendous right now and your feelings are so valid and what you're going through is so valid, somehow your body forgets. Like I struggle now when people ask me, I struggle to remember all the different symptoms that I went through, even though I know I was really suffering at the time. And then in August 2022, I cut out gluten and dairy because by this point I was in the ITSAN group. I was talking to a bunch of people, and I was learning all of the different things that I needed to learn. I also came across a naturopath called Tiffany Ch Cheung. I don't want to butcher her
Oh,
surname.
I saw her and I know who she is on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I purchased her online course because she was working specifically with eczema and TSW sufferers. And she hit the nail on the head with a lot of the things that I felt like I needed to change in my lifestyle and in my diet. And for me, I know that, this isn't for everyone, but for me, changing my diet made the biggest difference for me. And so, cutting out gluten and dairy, particularly gluten, was a huge game changer for me. And that was one of my turning points where I noticed things get a lot better. Um, and just eating more anti-inflammatory foods, avoiding inflammatory foods, and just really taking care of my nutrition. And something she taught me that was so important was that I should not be working to avoid everything, but really start looking at what I need to be adding to my diet to promote healing, to promote, good skin health, to promote good sleep and all the rest of it. And I think that was a huge mindset shift for me because up until that point, it was like, oh my God, there's so many things I need to cut out. And that became overwhelming for me. And so, with her help, I was able to come up with, I guess, options when it comes to food and food freedom, which was big for me because I'm such a foodie. And so that was a big game changer for me until I contracted a staph infection in September of last year. That was horrendous. It was so horrible. It was all over my face.
Ugh.
And I didn't know it at the time, but alongside having a staph infection, I also had eczema herpeticum, which I'm not sure if you've seen before, but it's basically these red dots and they spread like wildfire. My face was completely swollen. My lymph nodes were swollen. And I was just extremely uncomfortable. And that for me, I think was rock bottom. And even though I had, made so much progress at that point, just being hit with that and finding myself back in severe flares as well as these infections was just, it was a lot to handle. It was a lot to bear. And at the time I was in Toronto because by this point I had moved to Toronto and I had been avoiding video calling my parents because I just didn't want them to see my face and I didn't want them to worry. And, I was going to the doctors with a lot of hesitation, but I went nonetheless because at this point I realized, okay, I really do need the antibiotics, even though it's going to undo a lot of the work that I've done on my gut. I don't really have a choice at this point because it's going to spread if I don't. And I remember speaking to my mom, and she's like, okay, you need to turn on the camera because I need to see your face. And I did. And she was great at keeping calm, but I knew inside, it was hurting her. And so off the back of that, we made a plan for me to leave Toronto and to fly back to London, which I had been living, for the most part of the last 8 years before that, because I knew the medical system in London. I knew the doctors in London. I was really struggling in Toronto to find people that I trusted without being gaslit. And that was extremely hard to go through alongside, all of the infections and all the rest of it. And so coming to London, met my GP who I've been going to for years, and straight away he didn't know about TSW, he'd never heard about it, but he just held space for me. He just was there for me. He encouraged me to listen to my body. And, I consider myself very lucky because I know so many people go through a very difficult time with doctors and sometimes never find someone who just gets them.
And I think
And
it's not, to your
so,
point, it's not always about them providing us with solutions or answers, because
Mm-hmm.
they're limited too. They're just human beings. But it's like you said, it's holding that space, not
Mm-hmm.
dismissing somebody if it's something that they've never heard of before or something that they
Yeah.
maybe don't even actually believe. But it's like, it's just to have somebody that's a professional, a medical professional, that's going to sit there and take the time with you and say, I want to hear this. I want to hear what it's been like for
Mm-hmm.
you. Like, I don't know if I can solve this, but I care enough about you as my patient that I will, if I don't know the answer, I'll see what I can figure out. Like, that's really
Mm-hmm.
all, that's all we want.
Oh, I totally agree. And it made all the difference to how I was viewing medical practitioners, because by that point, and I was very honest with him, by that point, I felt very angry at the medical system, and I felt very angry at how I'd been treated by various other doctors. I felt angry at the fact that I wasn't believed by various other doctors, and that I was just made to feel like what I was going through wasn't real. And so, being able to speak to somebody who was a medical professional who just held that space made all the difference for me. And I think, in addition to that, what really gave me so much peace was he agreed to do every single test I threw at him. So, he, and thankfully I have insurance, which I'm very, very, very grateful for. And they've covered a lot of what I've had done, in the process of going through this journey. And so I'm super grateful for that. But he did every allergy test, he did every blood test that I asked for. And, he knew that I was getting these tests simply to give me peace of mind. And he was okay with that. And, through that experience, I never actually found doctors that knew how to treat topical steroid withdrawal. I found a couple who are actually now on the list that Itsan provides, who have heard of TSW, who understand TSW, and who are willing to help you walk through it. But they don't necessarily know exactly how to treat it, because, I mean, it's new to us all, right?
So,
But I think for me, my turning point was definitely last year. I want to say probably November time, because by this point
just
I
a
had
couple months ago.
yeah, I had recovered from my infections. I was in London. My parents had come to visit me in London. I hadn't seen them in, over a year. Just being around my parents, being cared for by my parents, having that unconditional love and being cooked for, it just took a lot of the weight off my shoulders and just allowed me to be very, very vulnerable. I think I released a lot of stress in that time as well. I cried a lot. And I forgot to mention actually that throughout this process, therapy has played a big, big role for me, because I needed it to process my feelings, to process everything that I was going through. Therapy has been huge in helping me kind of bring down my stress levels a little bit. And I think that all of it paid off. So, by that point, I was eating right, my stress had come down, I had spent time with family, and I was off on a massive adventure. I've been traveling for the last 2 months. And so that all of that combined has really turned things around for me and my skin. I can't remember if it was on one of your episodes or it was somewhere else that I heard, trying to get on with everyday things and do the things that make you happy rather than letting your skin dictate how you live your life
Mhm.
can make all the difference in your healing. And of course, it made all the difference in my mindset. And so I contribute all of that to, this turning point for me. And, I don't know how much it shows up on the camera right now. I'm extremely dry right now, but
Can't tell.
it's nothing compared to what I used to go through. My flares maybe last 2, 3 days at the most. I flew into London yesterday from Kenya. I always flare up when I fly.
You did this yesterday. You must be exhausted. Thank you for,
Yeah.
I feel bad. Oh gosh.
No, I feel great. I slept through the night, which
Good.
I'm always so grateful for after
Good.
being through my TSW journey. I feel wonderful. I still have discomfort sometimes in my skin, but that's all it is. It's just minor discomfort.
Mhm.
I'll have bad days here and there, but honestly, I feel like I've built the tools to be able to get through it, not just physically, but also mentally. And there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm still going through it, but having this mindset is making it so much easier.
I love that. And with that, we're going to take a really quick break for a quick little announcement, and we will be right back. Did you know that there is a journal out there just for those of us that have topical steroid withdrawal? And whether or not you're a journaler, this is the best way for you to track what's working, what's not, and enjoy your healing journey. So inside this journal, you get 3 calendars to track your next 90 days of healing. There's free resources, actually even a free gift for every single one who purchases this journal. Plus you get action steps to try, a joy list, gratitude prompts, so many visualization techniques, affirmations, a web of support, mini mental health exams to help you check in with yourself, stress management and grounding exercises, and so much more. This journal has been tremendously helpful in my own healing journey, and now it's available for every single one of us. How cool. I want to invite you to get your hands on it, and you can do so by going to tswjourneytohealing.com/journal. Get yours today and let us know how it's going for you. Okay, now let's get back into the episode. Okay, and we're back. So that was a perfect little segue because now we're really hitting the whole mindset piece of it. And it probably was one of my episodes that you had referenced a little bit ago. It's something that it's come up quite a few episodes, all the power of the mind to heal the body, and just like, and I know it's hard if someone right now is listening to this episode and they are in the thick of it, in the trenches. I want to validate you and just say that it's okay if you want to curse me out right now with what I'm going to say, because I wanted to smash plates, put my fist through the wall, like more times than I can count, scream at my people that I love just because it was so unbearable. So I get it. When you hear something like this, it might cause a little feeling of rage. But the truth is, what I have found, what I think so many others have also found, is if you stop, your body's already going through so much. And by you having those feelings and emotions also get trapped in our cells. And this is not like a woo-woo thing. This is just a scientific fact. It's just a fact. Our thoughts become things, our emotions are stored in the body. That's why when we have trauma responses, sometimes based on what our body had gone through in the past, and something triggers that, right? And so you can almost experience it again. So why the question that I started asking myself, that maybe somebody listening will want to ask themselves, is when you're feeling like out of control and you're feeling completely in a state of rage and anger and like frustration to the millionth degree, rather than fuel and feed those negative emotions, try to kind of shift your mind, focus, anything you can do to distract yourself, which I know sometimes this is not possible. I understand that. But if at all possible, focus on, okay, that's happening right now, but this is temporary. I kept saying, when I was one of my couple worst nights that I had a few nights earlier on, when I remember thinking, gosh, I really do want to die. This is really that bad. And I was having those awful thoughts.
Yeah.
A couple people on the Itsansider that I've connected with, they were up in the middle of the night, whatever time zone it was for them. And they were saying, like, talking me kind of through it. So having the support, whatever your support system or people you can reach out to, is key. But all they kept saying, which then I carried with me, was, this is just temporary. This is just temporary. This is okay. And like, although my body was itching me and I was, clawing away, I was like breathing through it as much as I could. And I was trying to find something in my head, a thought that I could replace what was going on up here with something that sparks joy, something that makes me laugh, something that makes me smile. And again, this is so much easier said than done. But if you start to put these things into practice, it's like anything. It's practicing a new routine, a new habit, a new train of thought. You're kind of like rewiring your brain. And similar to you, although my first couple months were really, really bad. So I think you said your first 3 months, right? They were not.
The first month I had no symptoms, and then the first 3 months was sort of that burning. Yeah, it wasn't major.
So it's similar to you. Like, I think our December, right? My December wasn't so bad. I do remember getting the red sleeves and stuff, but I wasn't really I was seeing things, but I wasn't really experiencing the feelings. But then that's why I say, like, months 1 through 4, sometimes even going into the 5th month, that was really unbearable, excruciating beyond all reason, like every single symptom known to man. But then I took a little shift, but then you relapse, right? And you go, it's like that roller coaster. When I noticed the biggest shift, again, so similar to you, is probably a couple months ago, when I just made a decision and a choice, like, no, this is not my life. This is not a death sentence. This is not how I'm going to, like, I'm not waking up every day dreading my day. I'm not going to do this. Like, I just kept changing my mindset. I was trying to meditate. I was getting out in nature more. I was not allowing this to dictate who I am or make this all my whole story. And so segue now into the next question I have for you, which is, what are some mindset or mental health practices or tips or tricks that you could share that maybe somebody doesn't know about? Maybe they can try something that's been helpful for you.
I think everything you said is so valid. I would go as far as adding one more step, because I think, those difficult feelings that you're talking about, and the feelings of rage or anger or confusion or disappointment, whatever it might be, can feel so heavy. And so to shift from feeling that to distracting your mind with something else, or telling yourself that this is temporary, can often feel extremely difficult. And so I would go as far as adding a step between, where you're learning to process those feelings. Because if you're not taking the time to be able to process what you're actually feeling, it becomes almost impossible, if not extremely frustrating, to be able to shift your mindset to a place where you're actually doing something that then helps you, move away from those feelings. And so, even though it might feel like the most difficult thing to do, learning to sit with that feeling and understand where it's coming from.
Well, and giving yourself permission to feel it, right? Because you are absolutely
100%.
in your right to feel what you're feeling, because it isn't fair. We didn't ask for this. It is that's a great point you just said, because that was, if you want to get angry, don't suppress it, let it happen, but just know that I'm not going to live in this place. I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to let this happen. And that's okay. I'm allowed to feel it. I have every right to feel what I'm feeling.
Yeah. And that's regardless of what anyone else around you is telling you, whether you have doctors who are gaslighting you, whether you happen to have a partner that's not very supportive, or you're living with a narcissistic parent, whatever it might be, your feelings are valid regardless of whatever situation you're in. And it's important to get to understand that and to internalize that, so that you're giving yourself the space to be able to move through them, feel them, and as a result, move past them. Because if you're not moving through your feelings and you're not allowing yourself to feel through them, like you said before, they get stored in your body. And that becomes pretty difficult to shake. But if you are sitting with them, it can even sometimes just take a couple of minutes. And, I'd recommend trying this. Just sit there, acknowledge what you're feeling, name the feeling, give the feeling a name. Okay, right now I'm feeling sadness, or right now I'm feeling frustration. And, for a lot of people, we're not given the opportunity to learn about our different feelings and what they are. And so look up a feeling wheel on Google, within Google Images. If you look up a feeling wheel, it'll give you like hundreds of different words for all the different feelings that you might be feeling, and start getting to grips with that. Start getting to grips with what you might be feeling in a moment, and notice what happens within your body, as like the sensations within your body. As soon as you name that feeling, as soon as you say, I see you and I understand why you're here, and now I'm ready for you to pass. It might sound so silly in theory as we talk about it, but that's why I would recommend actually trying it the next time that you're overtaken by a really, really overwhelming feeling, and see what it does for you. And then that's where the different tools come in terms of shifting your mindset.
I love that you just said that. And for a couple of reasons, but we're so used to, like, you and I similarly, like when you start to sweat, sometimes that's a trigger, and that because it's kind of an instant response. Sometimes we're in this whole world trying so hard to figure out what's the trigger. And so we become obsessed with what the food we're putting in our mouth, or the product we put on our skin, or the experience of perspiration, sweating. And none of those, I don't think I've ever heard anybody really share it and say it, which is so almost equally, if not more important, is our emotions sometimes manifest things in our body. And that's the thing we tend to ignore more than everything else. So if I was just yelling at my mom and we were in a huge fight, and then shortly after that, I start seeing my neck is bright red and now I'm itchy here, or my whatever, it's like, no, that probably, we don't know for sure. That probably wasn't what I ate for lunch. It's probably what literally just happened and created all this super amount of stress and anger and these negative feelings, which are expressing themselves through my body in this way. So it's really this whole look, in some ways, I hate what we're going through, but there is lots of blessings if you look for them. And one of those blessings is just that it's you taking the time to really understand your body and how it works with mind body connection, which I don't know if I wasn't going through this, if I would have taken the time or had the patience or had the desire to really learn more about how I am built and how I operate as a human. So, yeah. And for that way, that's pretty cool. It's a nice gift to get from this.
Yeah. And in the same way, I don't think I would have got to a place where I've never been super self-conscious when it comes to my appearance, but the usual things that someone might go through when they look at them like in the mirror. Or I used to be worried about, if I had a zit on my chin, or if I had frizzy hair, or whatever it might be. And I have never felt as confident as I do now in my body, in my appearance, in showing up just as I am without having to wear makeup or whatever it might be, than I ever have before. I've been walking around makeup free for the last 3 or 4 months and feeling really great about myself. And so in some ways, I agree. This has been a huge gift for me.
I love that you said that. I totally agree. I think having eczema as a child, sometimes, sure, you can always be self-conscious, which of course can affect your confidence. And I was probably more of, I don't know why I was insecure, because I did have, besides the eczema, I wasn't a kid that went through, horrible acne or having lots of things to be self-conscious about, yet I was. And going through this, again, a blessing in disguise with all this is I actually have been makeup free for the majority of the entire year, was aside from maybe a handful of times that I had some kind of occasion or thing to go to where I really felt like, I had to try to cover something up, the redness or whatever it was. And I didn't think that I'd ever get to a place where, and I'm only 36, but I just didn't, I thought makeup always makes me feel good. So why would I not want to put it on every day? Now I'm like, no, my skin is an organ. It wants to breathe. And also, I don't care if you don't see beauty when you look at me. My beauty is in my heart on the inside. Honestly, I look at people, and this was a bunch of episodes. I think a lot of guests have agreed with this. We see people with such empathy and love now. I don't, it's so again, another gift. And I totally agree with you. And I don't know if you feel like this, but I love putting makeup on, like such a girl like that. And I enjoy the process of it. But I kind of told myself that it's kind of an extra step and it's kind of annoying. And also I'm gonna wear it, but I don't feel the need to, or even I don't want to wear it as nearly as often as I did in the past.
Yeah, because that's the big difference, right? Wanting to rather than needing to. Yeah.
In a very filtered world where we see, Instagram, one filter after the next, and you don't know who's really real and what people really actually look like. It's just, and guilty as charged. If you've ever seen me online, obviously sometimes I use filters because they're fun, but it's in real life scenarios when you actually walk out the door and you show yourself to the world, not to feel like you have to hide, not to feel embarrassed. It's such an awesome feeling.
Yeah, it really is.
Awesome. So what tips would you give somebody if they are struggling really bad with poor mindset, and because of that, probably are suffering also with mental health, because that is a huge, huge, huge piece of this, that we're always looking at the physical because it is such a wow, like shocking scene that we see in the mirror every day and other people seeing us like this. Like, so that obviously affects our mental well-being, mental health as well. What are some things, easy things, whatever has worked for you to shift your mindset, a couple things that you could leave somebody with it can give them food for thought?
A few super easy things. Actually, this first one, easier for some people more than others because it depends on who you have around you. So take a look at, the people that are around you. You need to have some kind of an outlet. And so whether your outlet is something like journaling, where you're choosing to write down your thoughts and your feelings, or that's somebody that you're choosing to talk to, I would definitely recommend you find someone. If you're choosing someone to talk to, make sure that they're on your side and that you walk away from that person feeling good about yourself. So just notice how you feel once you spend time with that person. If you feel really great, then that's probably the right person to share your feelings with, to talk through what you're going through. Don't bottle it all up. Bottling it all up is a surefire way to lead to further like anxiety or depression or whatever it might be. And so this is part of that process of processing your emotions, is finding some kind of an outlet. And straight away you'll notice a shift. Even the first time, second time, third time journaling, you will notice a difference if you're finding a place to offload those feelings and work through them in some way. And then after that, I would highly, highly recommend, and you've mentioned this in previous episodes, and I know it might sound like people harp on about this, but gratitude is huge. Gratitude is huge. And if gratitude sounds daunting or boring or whatever whatever feelings you might have around it, what I would say is to just look at the difference between your day yesterday to your day today. Like, I think back on my journey, and today I'm grateful that I can wear a hoodie. I couldn't wear a hoodie a few months ago because I'd sweat in it and then I'd get uncomfortable and then I would itch and then I would have open sores and it would be this whole cycle. And so today I can think back and be able to just be really grateful that I can wear a hoodie. I'm grateful that I have thick, beautiful hair again, like shiny hair, because for a time I was losing a lot of my hair. I am grateful for being here on this podcast with you, actually watching you through the Zoom call and noticing that through this call, neither of us, we barely itched. And that is a huge win. And so, being grateful doesn't have to look like these massive things that, I'm super grateful for. I don't know, whatever it might be. If it's something that feels daunting for you, bring it right down to the tiny things that really apply to you and your journey and what you're going through right now. And doing that on a daily basis, even giving yourself something as small as 3 or 4 things to be grateful for each morning can be game changing.
I'm laughing because even before going through TSW, something that I'm a single mom. My son is at this time like 11 and a half. And I guess it started years ago when somebody told me about the 5-minute journal, which is just a gratitude journal. Now the TSW journal has gratitude and then a million other things. So you can check that out. But I mean, first of all, the journaling, talking to somebody, positivity, gratitude, those so far, I'm absolutely obsessed with these. But the gratitude, why I was laughing was before TSW, I would drive my son to school in the morning. And, as like, nobody really likes to talk to their mom on the way to school. They're like, oh, I don't want to go to school, whatever. But all I would say, it got to a point where I wouldn't even have to announce it. I would just say 3 things. And that's all I'd say. And he's in the back seat and he goes, the trees, basketball, whatever. And he knew what it meant because I kind of trained him and us. Our morning routine together was, give me 3 things that would make today great or make today special. 3 things that you're so grateful that you have. And sometimes he wouldn't play along and he'd be like, Nintendo, the game I just got, and the controller, like it would be, but I got to a point where I just let it go. And whatever the heck he wanted to say, I'm like, okay, who am I to judge? Even though I would like, go a little deeper, buddy. Right. But he wouldn't want to do it all the time. But I think kids, just like adults, we learn by experience of what, and we're watching other people. So rather than me harp on it, I just was like, okay. And mine are, I'm grateful that it's not rainy today. It's a beautiful sunny day. I'm grateful that I had a really warm bed that I was able to get a good night's sleep on last night. I'm grateful. So just like you said, it's the little things. For example, this morning when I took a shower, I was in there, and every time I take a shower now, I mean, I don't even, it's like, now it's a subconscious, it just happens where I'm just in there and I'm going, thank you, God, for letting me shower and not be in pain. Like,
Yeah.
that is wild. And until you have tragedy or trauma or something like this, and every human being does, but when you go through this, it's like those little things, like you said, when you look back, you're like, shoot, I can't really remember all the, your like mind is protecting you from blocking to go there, because it's like, we move past that. We don't want to think about that. Like, we don't want to trigger anything. Okay. But it is important to a degree to remember those things that we were not able to do. Like, some people cannot walk around. Their back of their knees is shredded. My knees were really bad at one point. Like, those little things. Talking to you, I agree. Like, meeting you because of this terrible situation we're all in, meeting all these wonderful people, like being able to just go out and about and just all these things. So it really does something chemically in our brain and therefore in our body, where it's like, oh my gosh, like, it isn't that bad. Nothing's ever that bad. Like, do I have my arms and my legs and my 10 toes, 10 fingers? Yeah. Do I live in a country that there's active like bombing and war zone right now? No. Do I? Like, there is so much to be grateful for, even in the midst and the thick of the TSW hell. Is there people still in your corner that like are crying over you and they're praying for you and they want you to get well? Do you know how lucky and blessed you are for that? Like, it's beautiful. So I love that. That is an awesome, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just had a laugh because I literally did it this morning, taking him to school, and he was just like, I don't want to do this today. And I'm like, please, like, watch how much better of a day you're going to have if you start the day and end the day with gratitude. Like, seriously, it works. It really works.
No, I'm so glad you shared that, because it doesn't just apply to us TSW warriors. And I'm so, so happy to hear that it's something you're passing on to your boy too, which honestly, he'll turn around one day and thank you for it, because it does so much for our mindset in general. And it really primes us, it primes us for a good day. There's so much science behind why it works. And oh God, I could talk all day about that. But I think I think the only other thing I would add, and there's so many other tools out there that could be talked about, but something I found really powerful, and this might be difficult when you're in the thick of it, but it pays off, is learning to talk to yourself in the mirror. And it's so easy sometimes to fall into the trap of feeling a certain way about ourselves whilst we're going through this journey. And I've spoken to people along the way who have a really hard time looking at themselves in the mirror, who have a really hard time believing that they're beautiful, who have a really hard time with just dealing with what they see and seeing that as gross or disgusting or not very pleasant to look at. And so I think it's really important to start normalizing within yourself that how you look actually isn't gross. It's not disgusting. It's your body doing this amazingly beautiful thing where it's working extremely hard to heal you, to rid you of the toxins that these steroids have, brought upon us, and to really get you to a place where you're feeling healthy again. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And so to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and to be able to talk to yourself about the things that are hurting you most, and, be that your appearance, be that what you might be feeling in that moment. I think that this was a really huge thing for me when it came to becoming more confident about walking out the door whilst I was going through TSW. And, it could be like a one-liner in the morning where every day I was getting a little bit more used to looking at myself in the mirror and not feeling so horrible about myself, but actually turning it around and looking for like a patch that had healed a little bit, or a feature that I still was really embracing about myself. When I was going through TSW, for some of the period, I had really swollen eyes, but for the rest of it, my eyelashes stayed intact. For the most part, my eyebrows stayed intact. And, I was able to look in the mirror at some points and finally start seeing, oh, do you know what? I cherish my eyes. I have really beautiful eyes. Oh, I love the shape of my eyebrows, or whatever it might be. It could be the tiniest things, but really training yourself to start getting to that place where you're looking at yourself from a loving lens and a very compassionate lens. And the reason I say to do it in the mirror is because when we're going through TSW, it is a very physical process. As much as we feel a lot of pain and go through a lot of sensations internally, a lot of it is very physical. And so you can really help yourself by easing that relationship that you have with your own appearance. And that went a long way for me.
I don't know if you listen, I don't know which episode of mine I did, but I definitely said exactly that. So I totally agree. It seems silly maybe at first when you're looking in the mirror and you're literally talking to yourself, but there's some level of comfort that you don't get from anybody or anything else than just getting real with yourself. And so I could go, well, I'm missing my eyebrows, and I loved my eyebrows. I had great, thick, dark eyebrows forever and ever, and I'm still missing hair there. Or I could look in the mirror and ignore that and just go, like you said, wow, my hair is feeling so healthy and thick and shiny. And even if my skin was flaking and falling off my face, oozing red, all the symptoms, because at some point they're all there and they're all present. If you look past that and look straight into your eyes and you're like, but the soul, that person on the inside, like, I am still me. My external appearance is maybe going through this crazy transformation. But again, I can see value in, like, my body is working so hard for me. So if I don't like really what I'm seeing, and if I could find something that I value or that I'm grateful for, that I can give myself that self-love. If I can't do that and I look in my eyes and kind of see within, I totally agree with that. I think it's actually another practice too, that we should teach our kids as well. Like every morning I used to tell my son, he would hear me say sometimes, like, you are a freaking badass, like whatever. Cause he knows mom's like, I'm not that mom that doesn't curse, like, oops, sorry, not sorry. But I would tell him, he goes, that is the most ridiculous thing. And I'm like, no, it isn't. Try it. And he like laughed at me. And this is years ago. Now he's like, would never do it because he's too cool. But, he would be like, you're awesome, or you're going to have a great day. And it seems silly, but if anything, you're going to laugh, even if you're laughing yourself, which guess what? Laughter is dopamine. Laughter is good for the body. Laughter is good for healing. So like, but it is so much deeper than that. Everything you said is totally spot on. I love your tips. Those 4 tips were totally like just epic. Really, really good. I hope that if anyone listening, if you're going to adopt any of these mindset habits and things that you're going to work on for your mental health and overall healing, let us know in the show notes, in the comments, reach out. And I want to thank you so much for this episode. Is definitely like, oh, it just made me feel so good. So I love you for being here. Thank you for, hopefully you're not jet lagged. You got sleep, which thank God we get sleep these days, right? It's so great. Yep. Let's definitely stay connected. And I just want to thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jen. And honestly, like I've said to you in our messages and all the rest of it, thank you so, so much for what you're doing. I don't think you realize how many people you're impacting through this show. I had listened to every single one of your episodes up until the time that I was traveling. I've got some catching up to do now, but they've really given me so much solace in some of my toughest times. And so please keep doing what you're doing. And you're changing lives.
That means so much. Well, I can't take all the credit. It's people like you and all these wonderful people that are getting together and we're sharing our stories. So that means so much to me, though. Thank you so much for that. Thanks for listening. Please remember to subscribe and leave feedback. With your help, we can spread awareness together. So please share the show with anyone you know who may be struggling with a medical condition and using steroids to treat it. And be sure to check out the blog for helpful resources to aid you along your TSW journey at tswjourneytohealing.com.